The Nigerian government on Monday confirmed the worst fears of many when it said COVID-19 Delta variant was spreading rapidly and the country had officially entered the third wave of the pandemic. According to the Director General of the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, Dr. Chike Ekwazu, 32 confirmed cases of the Delta variant in Nigeria were from 5 states, namely Abuja, Oyo, Cross River, Lagos, and Akwa Ibom. He said the biggest batch of sequencing from the Delta variant was from Akwa Ibom, with the state accounting for 80% of the cases as of Monday. Also, Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu announced that since last week, an average of 6 deaths have been recorded daily from the disease in the state and the epicenter of the virus in Nigeria. The governor said a total of 2,755 cases were being managed actively in the community, while 5,029 cases have been admitted into the state's coronavirus care centers. To discuss the onset of the third wave of COVID-19 and what authorities need to do to ramp up vaccine rollout and manufacturing in the country, we are now being joined by Dr. Ebere Okereke. Dr. Ebere Okereke is an epidemiologist and a consultant in global public health, a lead international health regulator strengthening project at the Public Health in England. Dr. Okereke, it's a pleasure having you. You're joining us today from Ireland. Pleasure to have you. Real quickly, let's go straight to it. We have the Delta variant. What should we be doing at this point in time?
So first of all, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to come back to this program. What we should do is, first of all, is not panic. The same public health measures that have worked so far will work. We just need to be a little bit more rigorous. The Delta variant is spreading globally, and we believe is becoming the dominant strain across the whole world. There are concerns about this particular variant in that it seems to be much more transmissible. And so that means that one case is more likely to create more secondary cases than, say, the Alpha variant, which was the more dominant strain until recently. There's some early suggestion that it might also be slightly more challenging for our immune systems to handle, in the sense that past infection or vaccination may not be as strong in protection as we would like. But I must stress that this is early indications. We don't know this is a certainty. We still know that vaccines are protective, especially if you've had the 2 doses or whatever is a complete dose of the vaccine that you've been given. And all the vaccines still offer some protection to the Delta variant. We also need to remember that vaccines are not the only measure we have. The public health and the social protective measures that we've been adhering to for the past 18 months still have a significant role here. So we continue to encourage people as much as is possible, wear a face mask, particularly if you're in any area where there are crowds, maintain distance as much as you can, wash your hands, ventilate your rooms, your offices, wherever you spend time with numbers of people, keep your ventilation going. Those measures are fundamental and will continue to support what we do to contain the coronavirus, whether it's the Delta variant or earlier variants.
Yes, but this is Africa's largest population, and with less than 2% fully vaccinated, and transmission driven, of course, by this highly transmissible variant of the Delta variant. Where is this likely headed? You said we should be calm, we shouldn't panic, but where is this likely headed in your own opinion?
Right. We should be concerned, we shouldn't panic. Panic, I think, doesn't actually allow you to think and respond in a logical way. But we need to be concerned and we need to be thinking ahead and planning for it. It is extremely frustrating that we are still waiting for vaccines to get to the stage where we have actually vaccinated significant proportions of our populations. We're not there yet. You're right, less than 2% on the continent. But there is good news on the horizon. We expect, I think, tomorrow, a significant number of doses of the J&J vaccine will start to be distributed across the African continent. The COVAX facilities continue to ratchet up. We're getting donor-donated vaccines, but it is going to take a while before we have enough vaccine coverage to ensure that we can reduce transmission, which is why I emphasize again the importance of the public health measures that we have been relying on so far, and that we need to persevere and continue to deal with that. So the public messages need to be, Africa is in the third wave, and this third wave is looking much more significant than the first and the second in terms of the number of cases. And also the number proportion of deaths seem to be going up. This is early data, but from places like South Africa, which have the largest number of cases on the continent, there's definitely evidence that this is going to be a much more significant wave than the earlier ones. So the advice I would give to Nigerians is be alert. Don't assume that COVID is over, because it is not. Take the same precautions around wearing your mask, hand hygiene, ventilation, keeping distance as much as you can. If you are unwell, follow the local guidance. Contact the Nigeria CDC, get tested, stay home while you're potentially infectious. Let your contacts know if you've got COVID so that we can reduce the spread, while the officials led by the Africa Center for Disease Control, WHO, and Nigeria CDC, Nigeria, and the Nigerian Primary Healthcare Development Agency continue to push to get the vaccines and distribute them so we can actually protect ourselves more robustly.
Well, I mean, with the exceptions of South Africa, Morocco, and maybe Egypt, 70% of these African countries are depending on charity. And you've referred to a COVAX facility. You're saying that we will get more donations, in a matter of months or weeks. But that's not how other countries manage the crisis. Take a look at Nigeria. Nigeria, for a period of almost 1 month, there has been no further immunization because we were waiting for donations. We finally got for 70,000 doses of unnamed, undisclosed vaccines from China. Then the United States has followed up with 4.8 million doses. So maybe when we get our acts together, we will do another round of vaccination and then wait for the next round of donations. Now, how serious of a problem is that, considering the fact that in many of these African countries, there's a very high degree of vaccine hesitancy?
Right. Just to clarify, I don't think it is accurate to say that all the vaccines that we received are purely dependent on donations. The J&J vaccine that's about to be supplied, for example, this has been procured by the African Union on behalf of its member states and has been bought. And I believe that Strive Masiyiwa is going to be making a statement in the next few days about that process. So we have been, and I say we here speaking collectively on behalf of African continent, I don't think, I can't speak for the whole continent, but the African continent has tried to work collaboratively to improve its ability to actually negotiate and purchase vaccines. So there is a reliance on donations, that is true, but there are also facilities around procuring them by buying them. The challenge is, even if you have the money, vaccine is hard to come by for a combination of factors, some of which is that some countries have pre-advanced purchased more than they need and reduced the amount that is there. We had not enough manufacturers globally, generally, for vaccines, but particularly on the Africa continent, we do not manufacture vaccines. Generally, we have only manufactured 1% of the vaccines we use in principle, and we're only just building facilities up to start to produce COVID vaccines. So that puts us at the bottom of the queue, even when we have money. It's an unfortunate situation that we're in. We recognize that. There have been movements for a few years now to say we need to improve our capacity to manufacture vaccines to avoid situations like this. I mean, the time to be prepared, of course, was before the situation happened. But even after COVID has happened, we can still continue to prepare, not just to respond to COVID, but to respond to the next pandemic, the next local outbreak, and whatever it is. We need to move away from a situation where the entire African continent is entirely dependent on the world to let us into vaccine markets. And this isn't just about donations. Even when we have money, we need to ensure that we're not at the back of the queue.
I mean, there's a Chinese adage that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So what are we doing as regards to second best time? Because either way, when you look at it, we're already far behind in this fight against COVID. What can we do? You talked about the MasterCard Fund. How can we, and we've got 2-3 vaccine candidates are here, correct me if I'm wrong, out of Nigeria. How can we consolidate funds to ensure that those vaccine candidates pass step 1, step 2, probably step 3? I mean, I think it's Cuba, a very small island country, but they've got their own vaccine that is out now, and they're rolling it out for their citizens. I mean, if Cuba can do it, why can't Nigeria, the biggest economy in Africa, do it? I mean, maybe I'm just talking as a sense of national pride, but I feel we can do it.
Oh, I absolutely believe Nigeria can do it. Let's not underestimate the complexity in vaccine manufacturing, because it's not just, it's about the research and development that goes in advance to create a candidate. Then there's the regulatory mechanisms, there's the infrastructure, there's the technology, there's the processing costs and everything. It's a long-term process, but it is doable. And what the Partnership for Africa Vaccine Manufacturing is aiming to achieve is to identify countries that have the potential and the interest and passion to to invest in vaccine manufacturing. Like you said, we should have done it 20 years ago, but we'll start today. And to ensure that we support those countries to optimize their ability to produce vaccines, not just for COVID, for all the diseases that we should prioritize for the continent, and to look at a systematic, coordinated way to make sure that the capacity we do build on the Africa continent complements each other and ensures that at the end of whatever period, whether it's next year, in 10 years, in 20 years' time, we are in a better position than we are today. And Nigeria has got to be part of that solution. Nigeria is, like you said, the largest economy, the largest single population on the continent. So there is a market in Nigeria. There is a market that Nigeria can feed across the continent. We have the expertise. I believe Professor Happy has been on this program before. For example, we have local pharmaceutical manufacturers who are interested. We just need to get that coordination going, get this work going. It is doable. It may not be the solution for the immediate need today, but we need to ensure that we put the solution in place for the future.
Indeed, we can get started. Dr. Okereke, please stay with us. We'll go on a quick break and we'll return to talk some more. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. We still have with us Dr. Okereke, an epidemiologist, a consultant in global public health and lead international health regulations strengthening project at Public Health England. Thank you so much for staying with us. Some promising signs as vaccines begin to trickle in to Africa. But let me ask you, because we have seen cases where some of these vaccines are nearing expiry and they end up being, destroyed or wasted. What can be done to improve that situation?
Right. That's a very important point to raise. And to clarify, most of the vaccines have a short shelf life, and so we need to push them out and get them into people's hands as soon as possible. That is a complicated and challenging approach, because you need to ensure that you can store them, you can distribute them, you can get people to the centers where you're going to vaccinate, and countries need support. This is a huge undertaking. Most of us don't traditionally have vaccination programs for adults. Most of our vaccination programs are aimed at children, so we're trying to reconfigure those strategies to address adults. Really pleased to say that the program that Africa CDC is coordinating, funded through the very generous contribution of the MasterCard Foundation, isn't just about procuring vaccines, but is actually helping to establish the logistics to ensure that the vaccines get into people's arms while they're in time. The MasterCard funded program includes the asking countries to say, do you need help to get the vaccines delivered? Do you need help setting up vaccination centers? Then they're supporting them both in terms of funds, infrastructure, personnel, training, and making sure that the materials that are required to ensure that those vaccines can be used in time. And also there's a coordinated mechanism for monitoring who is able to use the vaccines that they're being sent, so that we don't send countries vaccines they're not able to absorb, and the distribution is dynamic and moves to those who have the capacity to absorb it. Nigeria has a very good system set up through the Nigerian Primary Healthcare Development Agency that has a good networks of both storage facilities, and health centers for getting vaccines into arms. And the Presidential Task Force, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NPHCDA, have an awareness campaign that has worked so well so far, and which we hope will ratchet up now that vaccines become to be available, to ensure that people turn up and get vaccinated and we use up the vaccines that is available. So these are precious resources. We really cannot afford to waste them.
Well, Doctor, could you help us clarify this? Nigeria, it first administered the AstraZeneca vaccines. This time around, at least what we got from the United States is the Moderna vaccine. And during the briefing, the point was made that people should not mix and match vaccines. Whereas in some other parts of the world, in Indonesia, in Thailand, there is no objection to mixing and matching the vaccines. And there is also, conversation in Europe and also North America about how, when you mix and match, in fact, that could help boost your immunity. What exactly is the position, in terms of scientific research in this regard?
Well, again, it is early days, because until you've got a significant number of people who've actually had mixed and match vaccines, it's difficult to say how good they are. But there are early suggestions that some combinations actually at least are as good or maybe slightly better than just using a single product. So there is some studies in the UK that have suggested that combination of AstraZeneca and Pfizer might give you better immunity. It is early days. The recommendation is that take the vaccine you're offered. If you haven't got any opportunity, if you haven't been vaccinated, take what you're offered. We shouldn't be in a situation where we're saying, I've had this, I'd like a bit of that. But with the guidance that comes with the vaccine, which underpins its regulatory approval, is what we have to adhere to. So if the regulatory approval says that do not give Moderna with AstraZeneca, then that's what we should do to ensure that we're using the vaccine in line with its license. But it is a very dynamic situation. The evidence is building up as we go along. We know that combining one or the other may be better than, maybe just as good, if not better in some circumstances. But the important thing is to follow the instructions that comes with the vaccine's license authorization, because that is what the evidence is strong enough to say, in this context, this is what we recommend you do.
Real quickly, I just also want to talk about what is being done now, in this space as regards this Delta variant. I know you have a lot of engagement with the Nigerian authorities. I mean, what are the things that are going on behind the scenes that we don't know? What is being done now to increase, testing, as it were? What is being done now? What are the conversations going on, for more procurement of more vaccines? What are the kind of funding coming in that people and scientists and researchers can be part of, in this space? For instance, I want to ask, since Professor Happy has been doing all of his genome sequencing, has he been given any funding even by the federal government or any foreign bodies?
Right. Rufai, I need to confirm that I do not work for the Nigerian government. I am not an insider in the Nigerian government, so I don't think I'm in the position to speak about decisions and discussions happening behind closed doors. But generally, in principle, what I would say is that COVID has shown us how important health is to the functioning of any economy. So in making decisions about economic growth, we have got to put health front and center. That means that all governments, not just Nigeria, across the globe, need to reflect and review on their investment in their health and in their science, and the third arm in manufacturing, to ensure that we have the systems in place to deal with routine health problems and emergencies. There is no doubt that there is not enough investment in health and the science infrastructure in Nigeria. Nigeria is not alone in that position, but we would expect that a country that has ambitions to become a global power will look at how it invests in scientific development, in research and development, in manufacturing. Professor Happy is one example of hard-working, dedicated scientists, researchers that we have across Africa. There are loads of experts across our academic institutions who are not funded enough to do what they committed to do, to translate their passion and their activities into game changers in the continent and for in the country and for the entire continent. There is. I don't have to speak for Nigerian government. I don't have to be inside the rooms to say we really need to increase our investment in science, in research and development, and to support these champions of good quality science that is globally recognized that we have in the country. We need to do that so that we can also retain these experts and begin to reverse the brain drain that we've seen across the African continent, not just in Nigeria, for too long. We need to bring them back so that they know that there is work and there are opportunities for them in Nigeria and across the continent. And I think that some of the initiatives that COVID has driven have actually begun to show some of those dividends, but there is definitely much more room for more.
Indeed. And as the Delta variant changes the course of this pandemic so rapidly, even that is not enough to sway rich countries who have failed again to reach an agreement on intellectual property. And you're very familiar with the argument, Dr. Okereke. Some argue it will boost production, others argue it will hamper innovation. But do you think there is a middle ground?
There is a middle ground. There is a middle ground. We're dealing with a global emergency here. We understand, and nobody can argue with why you have intellectual property protections, because companies, countries, governments invest in research and development for decades that leads to the products that then they market. And so having some surety of profit and allows the commitment to continue, and particularly for vaccine manufacturing, which is always a long game. We understand that, but we also need to recognize that when it comes to the COVID vaccines that we have, most of the initial work to develop them was partly funded by some taxpayers from different parts of the world. And therefore, I would argue that since the taxpayers invested in those vaccines, if the taxpayers are saying we need to allow others to use these vaccines in this emergencies, that should be considered. There should be exceptions for the IP. But we also need to recognize that it isn't just about intellectual property, it's also about technology transfer and ensuring that you actually teach other people how to produce that vaccine that you've already got the license for, and so that we can boost capacity globally. Part of the challenges that the COVAX facility faced was the entire focus on manufacturing coming out of India to serve most of its needs. And then, of course, when India was faced with a huge crisis of its own and therefore was unable to continue to export vaccines, we ended up with a vacuum where countries dependent on COVAX for vaccine procurement didn't have access, and that's because there are not enough manufacturers. So we do need to say that this is an exceptional circumstance. We should release some of the controls on IP, but we also need to be looking at supporting tech transfer, looking at just increasing manufacturing across the globe so that we actually have resilience in our supplies.
Well, Dr. Okereke, I would have loved to ask you about the fill and finish arrangement, the type that South Africa entered into, and the partnership that Egypt has entered into for manufacturing vaccines. But if you would like to comment on that, it's just that we've run out of time. We have just less than a minute.
It's a start. That's what I can say in less than a minute. It's a start, but it's an important start.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Okereke, for joining us. Thank you indeed.